thanks very much for coming, although you weren't invited. And it was kind of so spectacularly rude to us and offensive, and also wrong because we were invited.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I thoroughly enjoyed the book, learned so much, and it's so interesting. So what made you want to write this book and take this angle for the book?
It's all Meghan's fault. She made this famous remark when she said, listen, there are two different things. There's the members of the royal family, and there are people who work for them. They're two separate things. And when she said that, she was effectively pointing the finger of blame at the courtiers. And I just thought, this is really interesting because everyone refers to them, they kind of talk about them, but they never examine who they are, what they do, what the nature of the relationship between them and the royals, or the principals, they always call them, my principal. And I thought it'd be really interesting to try and unpick that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting to me when I read the book because you don't realize just how influential, how instrumental they are behind the scenes. I mean, after all the research that you did, all the interviews and things like that, I mean, who do you feel really runs the house? Is it the courtiers? Is it the royal family? Is it a mix of both? And, you know, who kind of has the upper hand?
I think it's a very complex relationship,
yeah.
And there's no simple answer to that, because you see, there was one incident that I remember. It was on the tour of Australia, which Harry spent a lot of that time on that tour in an utter grump. He was in such a bad mood, and we were flying back from Fiji to Australia, and the kind of Harry's press minders wanted him to come down to the back of the plane to say hi to the media, which the royals often do, and we were promised he was going to come with Meghan, and they didn't come, and eventually the plane landed, and normally they've done it by then. They do this thing when you're in the air. Plane landed, and finally, after it landed, he came down the plane, and he said something like, at one point he said, thanks very much for inviting, thanks very much for coming, although you weren't invited. And it was kind of so spectacularly rude to us and offensive, and also wrong because we were invited.
Right.
And afterwards, one of his people said to him, basically your remark had gone down really badly with the media. And he turned around and said, well, you shouldn't have made me do it. So, it's an example of he felt he'd been made to do something against his will by the people who work for him. But it doesn't always, the big decisions are usually made by the royals themselves. So if you look at Brexit, the departure of Harry and Meghan, the big thing, they wanted a half in, half out thing,
right?
And the answer came, no, you can't be half in, half out. You're either in or you're out, because we don't think half in, half out works. And the person who took that decision was the Queen herself. That was her view. So these big decisions, and sometimes the royals don't, they'll reject advice. So there was a time, the Queen eventually started paying income tax in 1992 or so, but there was a time a few years before that when her closest advisor said, I think it's time the Queen started paying tax. This is looking unpopular. It's a bad look. And he wrote a paper spelling out the reasons why, and the answer came back, nope, not ready for this. So, they're perfectly capable of rejecting advice. So it's a complex trade, but they are very, very powerful, very, very important.
Definitely. I mean, in Spare, Harry does blame the three private secretaries of the Queen, Charles and William, for the harsh terms imposed on his royal exit. Do you feel he blames them for not getting what he wants? Like you said, the Queen ultimately makes the final decision, but do you think that he blames them for getting in their ears?
I think he definitely blames them. What does he call them? He calls them the bee, the fly, and the wasp, which are very good. Particularly the wasp. It's a particularly appropriate nickname.
Sure.
I tell you. He definitely blames them. And I'm sure they had an influence on the Queen's decision. But also, Harry loved the Queen. He loved his grandmother, and he kind of just didn't want to contemplate the idea that actually this was her decision, that she wasn't having it. That wouldn't have sat well with his personal relationship with her as a much-loved grandmother.
For more news content and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.